I have with me Abhishek Pandit, Director of AISECT. Thank you, Mr. Pandit, for your time. What is your expectation from this budget?
We are hoping that the government will focus more on financial inclusion this year, have clear agenda in the budget as well, and allocate funds specifically for financial inclusion so that the entire country would benefit from the activities that we undertake using financial inclusion. The government and everybody clearly understands that social transformation is a key factor in the country, and financial inclusion forms the backbone for social transformation, because only with financial viability of every person in the country will our nation as a whole grow. So that's the bottom line. We've seen the government launch a scheme last year as well, called the Pradhan Mantri Jan-Dhan Yojana, and the government now should focus on how do we ensure that these people who now have a bank account with them, who now have a card with them, with the RuPay card coming into picture, are actually utilizing the power of financial inclusion, right? Who actually start using these bank accounts. So activities like financial literacy, we need to tell them what the bank account is all about. How can they use the bank account? How can they utilize this bank account to ensure that they grow, they prosper? So that's one factor which we think the government should look at and try and see how we can come up with specific schemes to ensure that people start using the power of banking. And some models which have worked well in the past, for example, the business correspondence model. Right, we've seen in the past 10 years that these business correspondents who are there in the villages, right, with a fixed kiosk, working with the banks very well. Now we've seen that this model works very well. It's got literally zero risks in working as a business correspondent for a bank, and the people in the village also have got a sense of belongingness and are comfortable working with these BCs. So the government should actually encourage such models, which has worked very well, and try and see how we can incentivize these BC to be more efficient, to service the customer better, and the better BCs should also be encouraged by giving them better remuneration. So these are some of the specific areas that I would want the budget to focus on, and allocate certain funds to ensure that this becomes more robust and strengthen the backbone of financial inclusion per se.
Do you think there would be any new policies for different sectors which you are catering to under the new, Make in India campaign?
Right. So I was coming to that. When we talk about Make in India campaign, I think the government should focus both on urban as well as rural sector. We need to see how the Make in India campaign can actually spur manufacturing, for example, in rural India. How can we make sure that smaller SMEs benefit from Make in India campaign, and how do these smaller SMEs actually go to those locations where there are no manufacturing activities? And what I would specifically want to focus on is the skilling initiative that the government would like to take. How do we skill the common man to make sure that those skills which the common man gets today, tomorrow, are in line with the Make in India campaign that the government is trying to take or undergo? And what are those, for example, if there are manufacturing hubs that are coming through, what are those hubs which are clear, which are defined, and how do skills of these people align with the actual demand in the market? So there needs to be a focus around that, and we need to make sure that both the skills that are provided and the demand that's going to come because of the Make in India campaign are aligned, and there is no gap between the two.
All right. Do you think the government would be able to achieve the fiscal deficit of 3%?
Well, there's no yes or no answer there, but I think the steps that the government are taking are on the right direction, and with the initiatives that the government is taking, that deficit should definitely come. That should be shorter. Now we've also seen, say for example, Coal India disinvestments, and they are trying to look at various means and ways to reduce the deficit. But I think it's definitely possible, and the government is definitely taking the right steps to reduce the fiscal deficit. At the end of the day, will it I mean, will it or will it not? That's a call that time shall say.
How do you think ISET would be an enabler to digital India?
When we say digital India, again, we would like to focus, as ISECT, we would like to focus on semi-urban, rural, and unorganized sector, right? Unorganized sector, from what reports you would read, would vary from 92% to 80%. 80% is the minimum, right? That's the sector that we need to focus on. That's the sector we need to make sure that we make sure that they are digitally enabled. From training them digitally to making sure that they have an access to a digital device where most of their issues, most of their requirements are taken care of. I think that's the sector that we need to focus on. And even when we talk about digital India, that is the digital India that we need to focus on. While as urban India will, nobody taught us how to use a phone, right? In urban India, it's very easy. People will pick up. But I think the unorganized and the rural India is where we need to look at. Smart cities that we are talking about, those are the cities that we need to make them as smart as possible. When I'm talking about cities, they're actually not cities. They are villages and towns. We need to make them smarter. We need to look at larger numbers. We have to talk about not 100 but thousands and lakhs of villages. Talking about digital, we also need to have a reality check, right? There are from various reports you would read that there are more than 2.5 lakh villages where there is no electricity. Forget digital literacy, right? So keeping that in mind, we have to focus on that as well, and also focus on where we have basic infrastructure in place. How do we enable them digitally? And by enabling them digitally, we could provide them with a lot of services and activities where they could then move forward to do a lot of other activities to help either their livelihood or better the increase or make their life more comfortable from what it is today.
Right. Just one last question. According to you, do you think this year Mr. Jaitley would be making any radical tax reforms?
From what we've been seeing, listening and thinking, I don't think there's going to be a radical change in any radical change that would come about. I'm guessing that would be next year. There would be radical changes next year, because that will be good enough time for the current government to see and get a feel of what needs to be radically changed. This year may be a little too early to have some radical changes, but certain steps in budgets for common man is something. I'm guessing that is going to be a popular budget rather than a radically different budget this year.